Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us today on our executive pop-up webinar series featuring Kathy Ligon and with Hinge Brokers. Today, we're going to be talking about the future of your childcare business. We're very happy to have my friend Kathy back. Kathy was on our very first executive pop-up webinar series about 2 years ago. And she's been a friend and a confidant on different issues that we've worked on, and I'm very happy to have her back today. So before we get started, we're going to go through a traditional agenda here, and we're going to do obviously our welcome here, our housekeeping, talk about upcoming series, a few of the solutions that we bring, pay our bills, introduce Kathy. And I don't think we're going to have any polling questions today, but that was a little bit of a leftover, and then get into your future of your childcare business, and then a Q&A. Before we get started, though, I wanted to make sure to review the toolbar that you have access to. There's a few different items on here. And again, what we'd like to do is have you use chat only if you're going to be communicating sort of with the back end people like Hans, who's on the call, or Jen, where you're interested in more information about Kathy or Inspire Care 360, and you want to learn something more and say, hey, reach out to us. That's what the chat function would be for. The Q&A would be is if you have a question for Kathy and or myself for any reason, but if you have a question mainly for Kathy, then we will see that come up on the Q&A, and we will go ahead and put that information in. If we did have a poll question, you would have an opportunity to do it there, but I don't think we're going to have any of those for you today. So with that said, we'll just start pushing forward. And with that, let's jump into our housekeeping. Our next business benchmarking series, number 12, for each one of the months that we've had, is the financial considerations around succession. Today's session with Kathy is really talking about the future of your childcare business. And you are going to hear several different themes about how to build up your business, how to prepare your business that Kathy will be talking about. John, in our next session on December 9th, is going to be talking about some succession planning around the financial considerations, about structures, vehicles, whether it be an ASA, an APA, family transactions, things of that nature, different types of strategies, the tax strategies around it, including things such as a 1031 exchange for what might be available to you, when it can work and when it won't. Please join us on December 9th, 2021, after this webinar. Hans will be sending out a registration for all of you to save the date on your calendar. So with that, let's move forward and tell you a little bit more. One of the things that a lot of our members have come to us for has been Inspire University. We've spent a tremendous amount of time in developing Inspire University, and we've heard an awful lot from our members and prospective members too, who are very interested in knowing how can I really look to grow and develop our staff and our teammates. And they oftentimes don't have a very sophisticated means to doing that. We have developed that with Inspire University. It allows you to not only develop your staff using things such as us help you deploy handbooks, but also for your parent handbooks to be those sent out to parents. It also allows you to have orientations that are sent out to your staff even before day one that they join. All the operational procedures that you are seeking, all of our members have access to this with all of our operational courses. We have CDA courseware, 120-hour courses for $199, which is really unheard of, but it all delivered through Inspire University. We will be soon having e-enrollment. That means the ability for you to get your enrollment documents out, and the ability for people to do like a DocuSign procedure, so you do not have to be chasing them as much and trying to get them in the office. Also, we have over 70 hours of professional development on courses you really can't find in other places throughout our industry, very specific to the childcare and the ECE industry. All part of Inspire University, really dynamic courses that can be delivered to smart devices as well as PCs. And then you'll soon be hearing about our Total Rewards relationship, which is really a way to help pair up your team for the performance they perform to the rewards, the salary, the wages, the benefits they get. Of course, you are always able to manage your own library of content, whether it be from videos or courses you want to create or PowerPoint presentations, whatever, all through Inspire University, including your certificates. And then you can build the content. There's an e-content builder, so e-learning builder, that's all part of it, and a survey engine that all comes part of it. So if you want to learn more about Inspire University, please reach out to us. But it is one of the elements of your membership. And we also not only have it as part of the membership, we now have it as part of our enterprise solutions. And this is usually for schools that have 20 or more locations that they've taken advantage of. And you've heard before of our financial experts, and want to just talk about that again briefly. Again, as we are into tax planning season, really with all the significant changes that we have had regarding like PPP money or ECR money that have come across, stabilization grants or money that's being handed to you from the state. Some of this has been fantastic in allowing you to have a lifeline. But in some situations, a lot of these dollars are still going to be taxed. And the way that you are able to navigate through that taxing of those dollars, really like, oh, wait a minute, I just raised everybody's wages. I didn't realize I was going to get taxed on that. So that's going to be a big impact this year. If you're interested in talking to our financial experts, they are very honed in on looking at what is important to you, whether it be your key performance indicators, whether it be the tax issues like we have now, whether it be helping you source ECR dollars or other kind of stabilization grants or other type of grants that are coming down from the government, which there is a myriad of different things that are happening. Our financial experts are available. But with no further ado, I want to welcome and ask Kathy to join us. So as Kathy joins us, Kathy will be talking today about the future of your childcare business. I'll tell you a little bit about Kathy. She is the founder and CEO of Hinge Brokers. She is a former public accountant, former chief operating officer of an educational organization that I know for the time that she was there, she grew it tremendously from several locations to well over 100 locations. And with that, she had a springboard into doing that to Hinge Brokers and really has become a leader. I learned about Kathy as being one of the leaders in this industry and someone who you really wanted to pay attention to for what she was saying and the people she was introducing into the industry. She really started to introduce those people who are movers and shakers and the ones who are coming up with great ideas. We just recently came back from one of her conferences, the Shift conference that was over on the West Coast. What a fantastic event. Kathy, how are you?
Hey, Tony, I'm good. It's so good to see you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you too, Kathy. We're so happy to have you on board and having you come on here and talk to everybody that's out there who will be coming on today, as well as those who view this in retro. So with that said, you have a pretty, before we get started, you've got a pretty impressive record. I was really impressed when I first met you, and every time I get a chance to meet you and your team, I think you guys always step up your game. From your Shift conference, it was a really impressive event this past year. What was your take on the overall event that you had?
Well, you're very kind, and thanks to you and other contributors, we felt like the content was the best we've ever had. So thank you for your participation in that too. Much to our surprise, we had a record crowd. We've always capped at 300 because we do try to create a well-connected, pretty intimate setting, and we had so much demand. Very surprisingly that we went a good bit over that number this year, but we enjoyed seeing people so much, and it was just a great way to get reconnected and to sort of springboard our companies into this crazy world that we're now in, and trying to stay ahead of it.
Yeah, I learned a great deal from it. I brought a few team members out, and I'll tell you, it was great also seeing, for the people who attended, their level of, I don't want to say intensity, but their level of engagement. I think they were taking things even more serious than they ever had because of us coming out of the lockdown. So congratulations for you and especially your team, because I know that even though we lead our organizations, if it wasn't for our teams doing these things, I don't think we would survive. So
Absolutely. as I say to you, I just show up and talk. The team has it. They're fantastic at what they do. So we're grateful for those people, aren't we, Tony?
We certainly are. So here's the part where I get to hand it over to you and hand it off to you in the future of your childcare business. I know that you and I talked a little bit about, when you were coming back on, what were some of the kind of relevant topics, and we bounced back and forth. So if you want to tell me a little bit about, what you're thinking with the future of your childcare business and where you're going, and this is your presentation. So off you go, and I'll try to add in a couple of things if it makes sense.
You help yourself. So thank you for that.
So have at it. Let us know, it's your presentation.
Okay, great. Thanks, Tony. I'd like to start by saying, even in the very few short days that we put together this information of things to talk to you guys about, it feels like the world has changed drastically. And I know you guys know what I mean. It's like I expect to wake up and gravity doesn't work anymore someday, and I just go, oh, okay, sure, we'll deal with that now. The good news is that for our industry specifically, we have never seen so much interest, aggression, and movement in the selling patterns. So there's just a crazy amount of activity and competition for buying. There are a couple of reasons for that. One reason is that our industry got the recognition it finally deserved during COVID. I know you guys probably, like me, follow a lot of news outlets. I get about 20 news feeds a day on our industry. And rarely do I see the inflamed, some isolated crazy thing happened and we're all going to act like that's who the industry actually is. Most of the information that's coming out is incredibly positive and supportive of our industry. In addition to that, there's some big movement in large transactions. You guys might have seen that our nation's largest early education provider, Care Education, is in the middle of their IPO, so their public offering that we expect to be incredibly successful. And when things like that happen in the industry, the investment world takes notice and it improves everyone's value. So just today, where you'll see me say here in this information that real estate prices in the industry are stable with 2019, today, the information I got on several transactions blows that out of the water in a good way. So it's almost every day I say to people, it's stronger today than it was yesterday, and it is in a really good way. So if you're a seller, if you're a buyer for quality assets, and that's your succession plan, a little different, but there's still a way to do it. So let's jump into the content here. Okay, first of all, I like to advise people not to, have a vision for your company. So I'm obviously a company owner like you guys are. My vision was that one day maybe I would want to relax a little and sell this thing. 5 years ago, I would have said there wasn't another succession plan. And then 3 of my children have joined the company since. So have an option strategy and then be opportunistic. So we'll look at what some of those options are. What I'm saying is consider them all and then put your feelers out there and manage activities towards several of those options and then wait for the best opportunity to come to you. So let's look at, I mentioned a little bit of this, but let's look at what some of the trends are right now. So you guys heard me say already that there's increased interest from buying groups. There are a couple of things in play there. One thing, what I mentioned was that the industry will be more highly valued and is. Buyers love the benevolent nature of the industry. And there's a lot of energy around the potential spending bill, which we believe is both an opportunity and a threat at the moment, depending on where that money actually goes. And we're all watching that really closely. the investment community would say that would be to our benefit, and they expect that to be positive in nature, much more so than negative. And that's part of the reason. We also have an influx of international buyers coming into the US. We've been fortunate enough to bring 2 of Europe's 5 largest providers into the US the last couple of years, but there's still a lot of international money that would like to be in the US. Business values are just at record numbers for high quality assets. And when I say potentially rising, I would have marked out that potentially word if I would have developed this content today, because definitely rising. The team at Hinge has doubled our most active year. This year we've closed 79 schools. We have about, 71. We have 29 more to close this year at record numbers, which just thrills us for our selling clients who have worked so hard to build their companies and deserve to get the recognition and the resources for what they've built. Where I said real estate values stable here, before today, we had seen that in 2020, there was a slight softening of real estate values. In early 21, that stabilized with 2019, and just in days here, I'm hearing some pretty aggressive numbers in some of our real estate partners that are buying assets and investing in the real estate component of our industry. So I think that you'll hear from me over the next couple of months a change in the fact that they're stable, and we'll probably actually get some things done at record numbers.
So Kathy, let me ask you, for those of you joining that may not have been at, Hinge and what have you, you talked a little bit there, but you also mentioned it today about the real opportunity as well as some of the real challenges coming down, from the government. And I want to make sure that you and I are on the same page, and maybe what I'm thinking about when we talk about the opportunity, obviously, is from the investment the government's possibly making in the whole childcare world. But also the challenges is, the real concern that we've had, probably, at least I've heard it for at least the past 10 years, but it's starting to get very real. And that is the UPK and the pre-K and the pre-3s going into the public school districts. What is sort of your barometer on that today?
I would say that in my 35 years in the industry, it has always been the threat of universal pre-K has always been the #1 investor's concern in the industry. It has actually happened in some places, and there are a couple of states that are already universal in their 4K programs, and it did take some shifting when that happened. The good news there is those states allowed private providers to participate. It still requires a little bit of financial finesse to be sure that your financial picture is as strong as it was before. Obviously, the real threat is that our tax dollars would put all of those children in situations that we aren't allowed to participate in. The wide belief is that that can't be delivered logically. There isn't capacity and space to deliver that without the involvement of the private community. And also, I think for the first time, our government entities recognize that we can't stay in business and provide care for only infants to 3. So the education around that has drastically improved. We had a speaker who is our main lobbyist in the industry at our SHIFT conference, who believes that the real rubber meets the roads will be on when this money gets distributed to the states. Each state will have the ability to participate or not. They will also have the ability to make the decision about how the money gets spent. So it's critical at this time that we all step up and we all work with our states and meet with our legislators and give them the tools and information they need to be sure that this happens in the right way. And we're not just talking about tuition dollars. We could also be talking about staff supplements, training dollars, career paths, which are critical right now. And there are some resources out there to help you with talking points for that if anyone's interested.
Yeah, matter of fact, that group, is that the EECC?
Yeah, ECEC, the Early Care and Childhood Consortium. I always mess that up. Early Care and Education Consortium, Tony. I don't know. It always confuses me, but they are the lobbying group that that are the most instrumental in Washington in working on behalf of our industry. And I give them a tremendous amount of credit for the dollars that we've already gotten, which have just been lifesavers the last 20 months.
Yeah, and we will send out tomorrow, NCCA, which is not the Basketball Association, but the National Childcare Association, is doing a presentation with ECEC tomorrow afternoon, I think at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock East Coast time. We'll send that out to everybody on this call too, because they're both strong advocates for our industry. And I think, like you're saying, Kathy, right now is a time for us owners also to be advocates too, because our voice sort of needs to be heard, even though a lot of positive stuff, but those challenges can be scary if we're not on top of them. So I don't mean to derail your presentation already.
I know that's perfectly fine. We know how important and relevant that is to people. And I would suggest participating in that event tomorrow. That will be a fantastic combination.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's move forward.
Okay, so as you're thinking about your future, one of the things that you want to do, and Tony is a great advocate here, we are as well, the team at Hinge has developed financial modeling. We're launching a platform around that in January to help people know what their school should look like as compared to other financially healthy companies, where you have the opportunity to strengthen things a little bit. So your first step is to be as financially healthy as possible. And with that, in the short term, you're able to reinvest and stay relevant and stay up to date with current trends in the industry. In the long run, that is the driver of your business value. So the cash flow that you make and becoming as strong as possible then drives the value of your business in the future. So step one is to learn and know and seek out information and make changes that be sure that you're as strong as possible. One big issue right now is tuition rates, and being sure that you're operating in a place of strength and not a place of fear, that you be sure your tuition rates reflect the cost of care. Also, I get on a little soapbox about discounting, which is a hidden danger. Not that we shouldn't do some. There are some that we still need to do, but that's a whole workshop. So just know, seek out information. There are a couple of on our website around this, and I know others are speaking of it. So know and learn. The second thing is that also there will always be some excitement around your company if you are growing. So consider a second, third, fourth, 10th, 50th site. Consider a new program in your current site. Consider an expansion of your building. Consider going to your local public school and taking over their after-school program. Consider a collaboration with Head Start in your building. Be on top of things and be growing. I used to work with someone that said constantly, you're green and growing, or you're ripe and rotten. And largely that's true. And if for no other reason, if you have a dynamic team, they will force you to grow, to continue to create opportunities for them. So a career path for an employee is one of the main ways we're attracting top people right now. And for them to know that they have a career path that can take them farther than what you have today is critical. Also, I say develop sizzle, because the companies that have some sizzle component get higher multiples in their business value. So to name a few, there are a few curriculums that are viewed as sizzle curriculums. Those would be Regio. They might be foreign language immersion. Also, sizzle would be to really develop your brand, to promote your brand in not only your facility, but in the way your people communicate, the way they tour. Be sure that you stay on top of that and you keep your facility and your sizzle factor in front. And if you want to know what sizzle your team wants, just ask them. I think that you would, outdoor classrooms is a big one right now. It could go on for a long time there, but your team will get excited and rally around you if you just ask them.
Matter of fact, from some of the points you were talking about, we have done a lot to focus on eliminating some of our discounts, and it has helped out tremendously when you look at that P&L. Further than that, like we talked about earlier about some of the grants and the ECR dollars and that money that has come in this year, some of you might actually be a little flush with cash and saying, well, you know what, I'm going to have a big tax event this year. In consideration what Kathy is saying, now's an opportunity to maybe do some capital expansion, whether you're investing in furniture or kitchens or additional growth of your school and your centers. I know from talking with what I've talked to with my financial experts, they're like, before the end of the year, if you can get some capital expansion here, because the write-offs on it are immediate, and you can have some significant write-offs on that. So I believe in a lot of these things that Kathy is saying. So, great stuff.
Thank you. Thank you. So a couple of things to consider to prepare. Companies are always more valuable if the seller chooses to exit, and we'll talk a minute about what your options are, because you don't have to always exit, but usually when we get the call, they're halfway out the door, and ready to move on. But your team will be the most valuable, and your families and staff will be the best supported if you can work your way out of a job. So basically, you want to be able to leave and have a strong independent team in place, and there are no large holes when you go. So if you're the primary relationship person with families, if you're the person who primarily does anything, consider at least cross-training other people to take some of those functions, so you'll be prepared for all of the options. Another thing I'll mention is that with the buying frenzy and the competitive prices right now, a lot of buyers are going directly to sellers or potential sellers to ask them to sell. And that would be, I'm sure a lot of you have been contacted by some of those. It's a big compliment, and you should take it that way. They will be looking for things like a team who can take over when you're gone. I'll just a quick word of caution that the reason they're coming to you directly is to eliminate the competitive spirit of the process, which generally gets them a better value. But there's a lot of that going on. You guys heard me mention staying up to date on branding. Also, be sure that your systems are updated. So what I mean by systems are benefit systems, the way you bill parents, the way you communicate with parents, the way that you do your billing. Just be sure that you're ahead of the game there, and that you are on top of what the current trends are, and that you deploy systems that make sense. Put together a team of advisors for a transaction. Anytime you do a transaction, I suggest you have 3 teams or 3 people. You want a tax accountant. Tony mentioned that earlier, that there are a lot of tax considerations, which I'll speak to in just a minute. You want a transaction attorney. In my opinion, a lot of our clients use their business attorney or company attorney. I recommend that you have an attorney that specializes in transactions. And I obviously truly believe in the value of an industry-specific broker to guide you through the process, because it's a lot more complicated if you haven't done it than you might think. And the value is definitely more than just, I'll pay you this and you'll accept that. There are a lot of factors that go into the overall value. Also, you should watch tax strategies. we have a lot of our closings this year are with the expectation from our sellers that capital gains rates will go up next year. You guys know that it's been proposed to double. Most of the advisors I speak with believe that it will definitely change. Will it double? Most everyone thinks no, and most everyone thinks the change will be as early as January, but probably not retroactive into this year. So no one knows, it's just speculation, but I pretty much get that opinion consistently.
Yeah, and I think it's some fantastic points that you have there, especially with your team of advisors. Obviously, I can't validate you guys enough as brokers. Also, I just recently, in the past week, I sold one of my properties that used to have a childcare business. I sold out the childcare business in it. And it's great advice to say, finding a transaction attorney, because I was on the side of it, and I'll be very candid in telling the audience, I did not really have I had a business attorney, which he was great, but he was not really a transactional attorney. And for that reason, he was probably not completely as savvy as the guy on the other side of the table. And for that reason, I spent a lot of time guiding him and giving him my guidance. I was like, no, I want you. I'm paying you to give me the guidance. So anyhow, it's a good point that you made there, Kat.
Great. Good input. Thank you. Okay, so here are our options. And as we move through the list, and you guys may come up with more. I would love to know that. But as we move through the list, your company gets more and more valuable and more consideration. Some of it requires some particular size, and I'll explain that as we go. So the first one is, a lot of people don't get into business with ever having the thought that they could realize on the value of that business at some point. I certainly didn't. I was just trying to pay the bills and keep the lights on and food on the table. So you might be in that category too. So, but what I will say is the close the doors and move on and say that was fun strategy. I hope that none of you ever consider that strategy, because I certainly haven't been exposed to the industry for 35 years, know what you've been through to build what you have. And there's always some measure of value in your company, and at least give that a go. So in addition to that, we don't like to leave teams and families with no care. So I don't like the close the door strategy. That's the only one I'll say. Please stay away from that one. The next two are really, in my opinion, better suited for smaller companies that might not be a target for one of the larger organizations and farther down the list. So I absolutely adore the sell to a team member and I always put bunny ears around sell to a family member, because I'm not sure if people ever really ask their children for money. I probably wouldn't. But I do love companies that transition to subsequent team members. The issue there is generally resources. So usually if the company's worth a certain amount of money, team members don't usually have the resources to make that work. Sometimes they can go the SBA route and that works out, but I really love that strategy when you can support and reward the people that help get you there. There are a lot of people that transition or have the dream to transition to the second or third generation. Sometimes that works out well. Sometimes it's not their dream. It's your dream. So that is a direction you could go in and consider. As we think about selling to someone local who's not already in the business, there's a measure of risk with that. So that's what I mean by a local entrant, someone who's entering the industry for the first time. They're in your local market. That and a local competitor are two of the best options for companies that might be not a target for the next two groups. So maybe the school is a little smaller. Most of the national or regional providers are looking for schools that are in the 140 capacity and up. Very often they want to be in a market that is a B or A market. They will struggle with very rural markets where they might not already have schools to support it, or it's not a collection of schools. So those are options for schools that might not be the best target for the next two groups. If you're a target for a national or regional provider, and again, most of those have minimum requirements. So let's say 120 to 140 minimum capacity, usually 100,000 or more in annual EBITDA or cash flow, which is another art. So that's a different workshop as well. So it may not be your cash flow because we project it out and massage those numbers. So sometimes people are actually over those numbers once we do that, but not necessarily in the way they operate today. The benefit of those groups are they're serial buyers. They have processes and documents in place. They have transition teams that do well. They have cultures that work well, because people like us very often take buyers off of our list if we don't like the way they treat people. So all of these guys have cash and documents. They're never going to ask you to finance anything. They're going to be able to buy your company. But if we also don't like the way they transition the culture and the people and how the process goes, there are way too many options right now. So our team has the luxury right now to choose not to work with cultures we don't appreciate, because the last thing I want is to call you a year later and have you say that really stunk. You know, that did not go well and my people are miserable. I want to call you and I want you to say, yeah, there were some times I wanted to flip over the ledge, because there will be one or more. But at the end of the day, you should be really happy with the outcome of your transaction. When you get to some mass, so there are private, most of our national groups are private equity owned, and most of the super regional are also private equity owned. So the private equity community, private equity means that they take private individuals' money and they invest it in companies. So there is a tremendous amount of interest from this community into either expanding in or entering the industry. We have about 460-ish buyers in our database, and a big part of that is the private equity community. Your company would generally need to generate more than $1 million a year in EBITDA. So that for most people is going to be 5+ schools. And they also would be looking for a team who could then operate that company. So if they're not already in the industry, they need a team that isn't going to all immediately exit. Perhaps there's an exit plan over a certain period of time, but they would be looking for a team or a seller who is willing to stay in and help them grow and operate that company. So those are your options for your company. I think the next slide talks a little bit about what your personal options are. I alluded to this just a little bit, but you can always sell your company and go to the beach. And the majority of our people, that's exactly what they want to do. And this has been the most tiring 2 years of everyone's lives. And today we're getting the call with people wanting to sell. So it's been many, many years that the main reason was staffing challenges or licensing or regulatory challenges. Today, people are just tired, you know, so I'm tired. I made my way through it. I supported my team. We did well, but I need to go to the beach. The second one would be to sell and stay and have a role with that company. I'd say maybe we do this in 10% of our transactions, and there are people years and years and years later very happy with their acquiring company who have taken on fun limited roles or operational roles or development roles or growth roles. So all of those things are options. Once you get to a different stage, so a little bit larger company, at least a couple of sites, there can be the opportunity to sell some of your company and cash out a bit, but also keep some stock in the successor company and let that grow over time. So we've arranged that for many of our sellers. And then some of our sellers are wanting, and you need to have a little bit of mass behind you, at least some sites, and the proven ability to grow. Then a lot of our clients have just said, hey, I just need money. I mean, I need a partner who can bring me money and help me grow my business and real estate. So we've been successful in partnering people with growth partners who will take a part of your company. They won't just give you money and let you keep the entire stock of your company, but they want to partner with you and own a part of your company. That used to be a majority. There are, and that is still the main preference, but there are some partners who will now consider a minority position. They'll take more of your company, but that is also an option. So all of these options have become really viable, credible options for people.
And Kathy, let me ask you about the last one you had there about, getting a financial partner. Unlike the other ones about, the business side and the business options, if you're looking to gain a financial partner, you feel you have a program that's down well, do you have to be really of a certain size? Do you have to be 5 or 6 schools, or could you be smaller than that? Can you be, 3 or 4 schools or 2 or 3, but feel like you really have your program together? How are financial partners like that looking today?
Usually, if you have a smaller number of schools, you're going to be looking at an individual that probably knows you and a relationship with someone that either partners with you on the real estate or on the business. You would need to have a little bit of mass to gain a partner in the private equity community. So you'd probably need to be in the range of $1 million plus in annual EBITDA. So for most people, that's going to be somewhere around at least 5 schools, maybe 4 with really large schools.
And are you seeing those kind of deals being pretty fair win-wins on both sides, or are the financial partners getting a little bit better advantage here? Does it how have you seen those deals sort of come together?
Yeah, right. Well, we certainly would not let a client of ours get a lesser deal than someone else, but good question. I think that Tony, really that is in the eye of whoever the person is. So there's certain people who are willing to make the trade for the opportunity to grow and increase their multiple and increase their exit options, and also to gain some expertise from their partners. So that's very often a factor. And then there's some people who look at the opportunity and feel like it's not worth the trade-off in the loss of control. So let me just say that even if a financial partner allows you to keep a controlling percentage of the stock, they'll have some effective control over certain things that you can do or not do. Obviously, if you were going to give your money to someone, you would want to have a say-so in some of the things too. So to me, it's really just a personal decision on what the trade-off is, but good question.
And the last one before we move forward is, you say you sell partially and keep some stock, but that's different than doing a earnout. And I would say, so why don't you talk about sort of the pluses, but also certainly the minuses of an earnout?
Yeah, sure. So probably the major change that we're actually starting to see sort of go away now in our processes during COVID was structure. And by structure, we mean that the payout is more complicated than I will write you a cash check and you go on about your business. So before COVID, we also did earnouts. An earnout means that you will get future money based on the performance of the company. The negative of that is if you're exiting, you have no control over how that company will perform. The positive of that is if you're not already showing all of the cash flow that the company has the potential for, you can get some cash in the future. So I usually advise people be happy with the cash you get at closing and be happier if you get more money later. So where we would have done an earnout structure before COVID would be if someone had a new school or new-ish school or a couple of ramping schools in their mix that hadn't gotten up to full capacity and full performance yet. And we would base that on historical performance of the other schools. If it was a single school, then we would, of course, project that out. When we, other than that, before COVID, it was a cash, here you go, here's your check, have fun. When we got into COVID, we were in a situation where we had high performing companies that had softened, obviously, during 2020. And for a lot of people, partially 2021. The way we did that was we based our values on the stronger of 2019 performance or current performance. And if it was 2019, we would calculate the recovery. And that would determine the mix of cash or earnout in the future. For instance, if we're closing today and there's a company that's 80% of where they were in 2019, then they would calculate the value on 2019. They would get paid 80% of that value at closing in cash, and the other 20% would come as the other 20% recovered at some point in the future. So, and there are a lot of factors on how we feel about that risk. Occasionally things are so well aligned that the risk is very minimal. If things aren't well aligned and you're not sure you can depend on the team to create that in the future, then there might be too much risk with that. What I'll say is that in the last 2 months, with more and more companies fully recovered, and less of our buyers wanting to deal with that bureaucracy, we've seen a real shift back to all cash transactions. So we're really, the industry's now moving away from the earnout function unless we still have new schools that are ramping, which also is the case.
Awesome. Thanks for that.
Yeah. So quickly, because I want to give people the chance to ask questions, but we'll touch on real estate real quickly because that could be its own hour. Some options for your real estate: you can lease your real estate, conserve that capital, and use it for business growth. That is a strategy that a lot of people take. A lot of people also use landlords and landlord money to grow. It's a great way to do that. You can buy and lease to your operating, well, actually that was supposed to buy and lease to your operating company as I think I meant sell and lease to your operating company as an investment asset. So you can own your real estate. I confused myself. So you can own your real estate, lease it to yourself, and use that as an investment asset. You could sell your real estate only and use that capital for continued growth, or you could sell both together. And with our buyers today, all of those are options. Like I said, tremendous aggression from the real estate community and picking up higher performing assets. Their companies, most of our buyers do not also hold their real estate, but that's not a barrier. They're perfectly happy to lease your real estate, or they have real estate partners, or we pair them with real estate partners with a simultaneous closing in one offer. So it's a little bit seamless to our sellers. So all of those things are really strong possibilities today.
Yes. So let me ask you, Kathy, if you're considering whether to make, because obviously real estate is both a big investment, but it's also a big possible return, hence the McDonald's model, right? Yeah. But if an owner's out there thinking about it, should I really be looking at having to own my real estate as well as my businesses? When you look at succession overall, I think I heard you say most buyers are looking for the business, and there's other buyers possibly for the real estate, but more sophisticated buyers aren't always looking at both. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, what I'm saying is they're not owning both. However, every serial buyer that's a regional, super regional, or national company has facilities in place to buy the real estate. So it's just not them, it's a partner, and it's just as easy for them to lease your real estate or have their partner buy it. It's just two different entities.
Got it. Great. Yeah. So we got a question, and from one of our respondents out there who have said, or one of our attendees, I should say, says, who ends up paying your fees if you are to be helpful as part of the transaction?
Yeah, good question. So I'll answer that in a little bit of a roundabout way because I want you to know why. First, I'm going to answer the question this way. We get approached all the time to be a buyer's rep. So all of the national and international and regional companies would love to have brokers working on their behalf and buying companies for them. And I did that one time for about a year in 2010. And it was really because no one else was buying, and it was just easier that the seller didn't have to pay our fee. So the short answer is that we represent sellers. They pay our fee. Our fee gets paid if we make them money, and that's all they ever pay. If we close and they make money, we make money. And we like that model better because we want to set up a competitive process. In my 2010 year, I bought companies for my buyers several times when I knew they could probably do better if they were running a competitive process and I represented them. So I don't choose to do that anymore. We always represent sellers. They pay our fee at closing. I'm a really strong believer that with the relationships and negotiation, knowing the buyers and knowing all the soft issues on a transaction, that our team can more than make up for their fee. So, but the short answer is that our model today is that sellers pay us.
Well, and that's, and I think that's not only something that's admirable, but I think it also puts, the right level of ethics in mind too, especially because when you are representing a buyer and talking to a seller, sometimes, if they're not sophisticated, the seller, it can feel like you're being taken advantage of. So
that's right. And also I'll say that our team puts a tremendous amount of resource behind our sellers. So when they sign up to sell something, they not only get a broker, so we have 4 senior brokers, but they get a financial analyst that runs their numbers and supports the entire process. They get our marketing team that creates those documents. They get a transaction manager that manages all the just mountain of data that you're asked for and troubleshoots all of that. And then we have 2 attorneys on the team that help review legal documents. So transactions are complicated, and it takes a village to get it done.
Well, and so one of the things you mentioned earlier on a slide before too was you mentioned about how putting people in touch with some financial people or money people. Do you take a piece of that, or how does that tend to work?
Yeah, same thing. So yes, what we would do is we would make a percent of the money that we raise. We get asked the question a lot about what is your percent. I hate saying this because I hate when people say it to me, but it really does depend on the deal size, because in larger transactions, we can charge a lower percentage. Most transactions are similar in the amount of work that they are. So I like to really, we perform valuations and projections for people without charge, because we want to know we're a good fit. We've got a 95% close rate. So we generally know we can help someone before we get their company listed, and we don't take every listing. So we can do much better on the percent when we have larger transactions.
Great, fantastic. And I think you nailed another question that was actually being asked on the channel there too. So let's see here. We have another person who said, I'm reading this not really ahead of time, so I'm reading it live. Have you heard of company selling one location and keeping one location? In this situation, they're both around 120 licensed, enrollments. Is there potential buyers for how that would work, and not technically selling the entire company? So, and the real estate is owned as well. So yeah. I guess the question is, and I have a similar situation myself, and I've heard that before too. So what is your thought about that, selling a part of your business?
Yeah, yes, that is an option. A buyer will really, really, really push you to sell the entire thing, because it's just as much work for them to buy one school as 4. The other thing I will say is that your multiple increases pretty significantly when you go from 1 to 2 schools. And then, of course, it breaks all along the way as your company gets bigger and bigger. So if you have 2 and you were to sell 1, you would get less money for that 1 than you would for that 1 if it was combined with the other one. Very often we get asked the question about selling a troubled school in a portfolio. Not that that's a bad transaction. It usually just isn't an option for our buyer base. So that would be better moved to someone locally, probably. But yes, everything's an option. And we evaluate schools individually and as a collection. Also, when we do our evaluations, we give people what their expectation could be for a lease and what it could be for a sale, so they can make that intelligent decision that with both options.
Fantastic. We really have come to the conclusion. I don't know if anybody else has any other questions. If we do receive any last minute questions or anything that you want to email to us, I know that we can get the questions to Kathy. Kathy, I do have one small question. Whose hand is this over here? And you cut off their body in the photo. You know, I'm just really concerned that they're not getting the credibility here, but it looks like a married gentleman here, I'm thinking.
It's probably Alec, and I think I'm going to point that out to him and let him know that his hand is all that's important in this
Poor son. The poor son gets the short.
That's great. That's great.
So, well, fantastic. Well, Kathy, I want to thank you greatly, and I want to thank everybody who has joined us. Kathy, usually and always, and today for certain, a wealth of knowledge around this area. And as you can tell, each one of her slides could be a separate presentation alone. Kathy, I know occasionally has her own webinars, and they're very insightful, and I'm always trying to attend those too when I can, and I would advise you to do the same. They bring a wealth of information, and there's a lot of generosity with Hinge, the whole team, and especially Kathy, around their knowledge. So I'm very happy to have you, Kathy. I'd like to thank you for coming back on with us. I'm sure I'll be talking to you real soon. As a matter of fact, you've spurred an item on for me to talk to you about. So with that said, though, to everybody out there, we'd like to thank you for joining us for our pop-up executive webinar series. Our next one is on December 9th with our business benchmarking series, and it is about some of the financial elements of succession and some of the tax considerations about it. So join John Rizzo and myself, our financial expert, for that. So this is Tony D'Agostino with Inspire Care 360, wishing you very happy, rest of your week, as well as we get into the holidays. Happy Thanksgiving. Take care, everybody. We'll be talking to you very soon. Bye now.